Good. Jesus said if we didn't sing, that even the rocks would cry out. What he said on that Palm Sunday as they were singing his praises. Great to be singing with you. I want to start a little bit of change of direction today, a new series. We've been in James for the most part of the year, but we'll take a few of these little excursions, and today is going to be one of those. We're actually going to be, for the next few weeks, dealing with a topic. The only name I could think of that sort of came to mind was the end of the world as we know it. Now, those of you who are like me, teenagers in the 80s and 90s, that reminds you of a song that came out, but the end of the world as we know it. And I want to deal with a few topics over the next couple of weeks, Resurrection Sunday, and then on into the next couple of weeks. And today I want to deal with primarily sort of an overview of the whole topic, but dealing with fear itself and dealing with the concept of fear and how Jesus addressed and engaged fear. Now, there may be a few of you in here that don't struggle with fear. Okay, now, I know there's probably some real tough guys, and you sleep with a nightlight, not because you're afraid of the dark, but because the dark's afraid of you, and so you have to keep that nightlight on. All right, I recognize there's a few margins there, but for most of us, fear is a reality. Even as I alluded to in the prayer, that we're just bombarded. It's a fear mentality. There's fear mongers, people that make their living by creating and stimulating fear. I mean, pessimism is just the theme of the day. You can't turn on any news headline. And just thinking about that, I wanted to maybe pose you the question as you start to engage with the talk of what are you afraid? What fears do you possess? Are you afraid this morning of being a failure? Being insignificant? Maybe your fears are relationally driven. Maybe you're afraid you'll never be married or get married again. Maybe you're afraid that you won't have children and that reality is sober to you. Or maybe you do have children and you're afraid that you're going to be a bad parent. One day your children are going to call you up on the phone years from now and say, "It's all your fault, Mom." You'd be like, "Oh, that's a terrible, I would hate for that to happen." I'm this fear. Maybe your fear is driven by your health. Maybe you are in so much pain right now, and you've been in pain for so long that you're starting to have this wonder if I will ever live pain-free again. Maybe you're afraid of cancer. Maybe you're just afraid of dying. Maybe you're afraid of a painful death. Maybe you're afraid you'll be forgotten once you've gone. You're getting into that age where a lot of your friends have died, your family are not as close as they used to be, and there's sort of this fear, is anyone even going to miss me when I'm gone? Is anyone going to remember me when I've passed? And so these fears, they're just sort of haunting fears. And then we face them everywhere we go. And the signs of anxiety, they're everywhere. I mean, if you just follow the trends of medical and the medicines, and the anti-anxiety drugs, and the antidepressant drugs, and the therapist and that occupation of how people are constantly having to come and to find some sort of healing and relief. Not to mention the people that self-medicate through substance abuse, alcohol abuse. People that deal with severe control issues because they're driven by fear. They're overbearing parents, or they're an overbearing spouse. Or they are workaholics and they try to supplement in their life and in their schedule because they don't want to face some of the realities that are so looming and so fearful to them. And the signs of anxiety are everywhere. And as I alluded, it doesn't help that fear sells. I mean, fear is big bucks. My browser pops up every day on Yahoo. When I click Internet Explorer, Yahoo comes up, and there's always bad news. And I found this humorous. It happened yesterday, and it came up again this morning. When I opened up my Yahoo browser, the headline was, "The economy grows in the fourth quarter, but bad news for unemployment." And it went on, the article was all about the 6% rise in our economy in the last quarter, but how unemployment hasn't changed. And the whole article began to be spun towards how bad unemployment is, not to mention, the process of growth. And we rarely hear of good news. It's rarely offset, is it? I mean, you read the headlines, no one's talking about some of the good things that are taking place. About this time last year, it had been a few weeks ago, probably early March a year ago, I was coordinating the financial peace class. We do a financial peace class by Dave Ramsey, and I had the pleasure of coordinating that. And one of the topics that would come up to in the course of this class is retirement and savings and planning and that sort of thing. And you may remember, if you follow those types of things closely, that a year ago, early March, I believe it was March 5, the Dow Jones Industrial hit its bottom. 6,550, 6,550, the Dow Jones Industrial Average. And we were sitting in that class, and it was gloom and doom. We're talking about, the stock market and investing, and everyone's like, this is so nerve-wracking. Now, a year and a few weeks later, on Thursday, the Dow Jones closed at over 10,800. I'll do the quick math in your head. That's a 70% increase in a year. I mean, those are crazy investment numbers. The stock market has increased 70% in the course of a year. And you know how I found that? I had to go hunting and research and looking up numbers because it was on no headline. It wasn't something that was front page news. And that's just one little microcosm of something that's good, it's positive, and we rarely hear about it. It's the doom and the gloom and the pessimism and the fear and the fear-mongering that we're constantly, and it's just pounding us and imposing upon us. And fear, those of us who are gripped with fear, those of us who have fear issues, we know the sort of detrimental effects it can have on us, right? I mean, isn't fear just have this way of controlling us and make us, in reaction to want to control? We manipulate. Sometimes fear just immobilizes us. We're so afraid that we never take risks, we never develop relationships, we never take initiatives to do things just because we have this fear. We don't leave the house, we don't travel, we don't let our kids go, we stop this, we prevent this, and there's sort of this controlling aspect of fear in our lives. It makes us irrational in our behavior and in our concept, and it limits us greatly. When I read through the Gospels and I want to see how Jesus reacted with the issues that we still go through today 2,000 years later, and it's interesting to see how Jesus relates and reacts to fear. There's approximately 125 commands given by Jesus, personally from Jesus, in the Gospels. Okay, do this, don't do that. Start this, stop that. 125 commands. Of those, 21, 1 out of 6 commands have to do with fear not. Do not be afraid. Do not be concerned. Have no fear. Now, just to put that in perspective, you know the greatest commands? Command to love God and to love your neighbor. 8 times Jesus commands us to love. 21 times he commands us to stop being afraid. I think it's very important and a very serious issue. I want to look at one of those episodes, one of those 21 occasions where Jesus was confronting the fear in those who follow him. If you have your Bibles, turn to Matthew chapter 8, the Gospel of Matthew chapter 8. And if you have your pew Bible in front of you, if you didn't bring a Bible or don't own one, you can use that blue Bible, page 1508 in your pew Bible, Matthew chapter 8. Just a small paragraph, read in verse 23. Then he got into the boat, speaking of Jesus, and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came upon the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. Now, let's pause for just a moment. Now, this is Matthew, the disciple, who is presumably on the boat. He's one of the disciples. And he's giving us a first-hand account. I can just imagine Matthew in his recollection, and he's writing about this event. And he could have chosen all sorts of ways to describe this storm. He could have described it as a rainstorm, a downpour, cloudburst. He could have used any number of different words at his disposal, and he chose one unique word, a word that you probably wouldn't normally associate with the storm. He chose the word seismos. Now, you don't have to know much about Greek or original or ancient languages to know the etymology of that word seismos. We're very familiar with that because of Haiti and Chile. It's a word of the earthquaking, of a drastic event. It was the same word Matthew used to describe what happened when Jesus was crucified. The ground shook, a seismos. And here we have this